Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Verna and today we continue our conversation with the lovely Verna St. Rose Greaves, talking about bullying. Welcome back, although we went nowhere.
Nowhere.
Otherwise you'd be wearing a different outfit.
Thank you.
We spoke in general about our society and bullying and how you certainly have the view that it's a social problem, it's a national problem, it's something ingrained in our psyche we need to get out of our psyche. But I want to talk about, on an individual level, the consequences of bullying. Starting with the person who is bullied, whether taunted for being different, taunted for being weaker, physically beaten up. What does that lead to later on in life for a kid like that?
Well, it certainly affects people's self-esteem, your sense of self, the sense of who you are. Infuses you that kind of fear. We have children who are afraid to even step out of their houses. Like I told you earlier, children who tremble the minute you raise your voice or you try to talk to them. It's deep wounding, and if we do not put things in place to help those children to cope with some of the trauma of that, then it either that they go through life being so ashamed, feeling less than, being so intimidated, or they turn that around and they themselves become bullies, because this thing has some deep psychological effects and scars and impact, and we know of children who would commit suicide or who would try to draw some attention to themselves by either cutting, taking some overdose, not wanting to kill themselves, but certainly wanting some kind of help. It's a cry for help. So it manifests in a lot of ways. And I think that we have to really be conscious of some of those things. And one of the things I want to say is that a lot of the time, some of our proposals for solutions, whenever I hear people say zero tolerance for bullying, zero tolerance for me is never an appropriate response to anything, because it suggests that we don't want to hear anything. The minute that you commit an act or you fall outside of what we want, that's it for you. And if we really examine even the bullies, we may find that some deep, dark things may be happening in their lives too, that they're acting out, and it sometimes is indeed a cry for help. So you may find that you go to their homes and you find out that they are victims of horrific acts of violence in their own situations. So zero tolerance is out. So we always have to seek to find out, to prevent, to put things in place, to help people to cope, and certainly to deal with the trauma.
The problem is kids internalize it, don't they?
They do.
Because some people actually feel ashamed that they were bullied.
Do. Yeah. I mean, just for you to say that you were bullied and you have turned out not to be a bully, you're quite gentle, but it has to be that there was some very strong things in you and some very good things so that you can admit to that and that you can move on and still be your sweet, gentle self.
Not all the time, I hasten to add.
And well, neither am I, because I tell people I can be as vicious and as violent as the next person, but it takes a lot of work in terms of sorting through your own feelings, where you are, how you prefer to do with it, what are the consequences, what are the choices that you need to make, and those are things that we don't teach our children. We take it for granted. And I want to also suggest that the whole question of parent-teachers associations, I think every school, beginning with preschool, need to have a functioning parent-teachers association in the real sense. Not one that only want eggs for the bazaar and money and fundraising. Because my experience of parent-teachers associations when my children were at school, I stopped going a lot of the time. Because when you got there, you were not allowed to express yourself. You're not allowed to have a different view. It was a few people wanting to control, again, bully, and it was mainly about fundraising. But I think parent-teachers associations must happen in
But you need parents to engage as well, don't we?
We need to have parents having a say. We need to have parents and teachers working together, not as fighting one another and only come because I want to put a teacher in their place kind of thing. So we need to have that happen in every school, and it must have a formula that, you know the head table thing. It's interesting. I was working with a group last week, and the minute you say set up the room, the first thing people put down is a head table, and they put 3 or 4 chairs, and then they put the chairs for the rest of the people way down here.
For the hoi
so
polloi,
so the power dynamic is already set up. So those 3 or 4 people at the head table, they're in charge, and this meeting is about them, and and you have to start teaching people now. It's a whole new way. This whole question of consultation, because we use that word all the time, but we don't really follow through on it, So that some of us, our voice takes over, and the other people are afraid to even tell us to shut up. And it's something that we even have to do in our classrooms, that we are not the repository of everything, and that sometimes children need to be heard. We have to put in structures for discipline, and discipline does not equate to beating and to licks and to punishment. It's about much more than that. So we need to pay some attention to student bodies, the student groups, or whatever it is we choose to call them, where we get to hear what are some of the suggestions that the students think should happen. Yeah.
Do we have the resources in this country for psychological counseling for kids who are bullied?
We have the resources, but it's not a priority for us. We have to prioritize what is important. Issues of mental health. We are not even thinking about the mental health of our children. One of the things that we look to is that we say people mad. And when we say mad? When you take off your clothes and you run down the road, or you chop up somebody or something. But we don't understand, even in terms of special needs population, how do we diagnose what ails our children? Because frustration from not being able to understand and not being able to learn, and seeing you, Vernon, as getting through with your work, and I'm always the clown in the class because I can't get the work done, so I mask it in terms of my behavior. So what do? I beat up on you because you're showing me up. You're making me look like a dunce. How do we diagnose? How do we test? How do we treat with children who are having those problems? Where is the whole question of a psychologist on our list of priorities? We are offering a lot of scholarships. Are we really targeting the areas? Have we done the research to understand what are the areas we need people in? And we give scholarships for those areas rather than just tell people, take GATE, go and study. So we have a whole set of people doing one area, but where we really need the specialists, we don't have it. How well do we treat with our counselors and our social workers? Do we have things in place to help them? Because how many children can a social worker attend to without the social worker himself or herself getting some attention in terms of debriefing, in terms of coping? So those are some of the things that we have to look at.
We don't take mental health seriously at all in this country, do we? Because, we tell people who are depressed, snap out of it, for example.
We take depression as a joke. Yeah, people say that.
Go to a FET. That'll get you out of it.
And move on, yeah?
It's a sign of weakness.
Education. We have to treat with a question of sex education. A lot of the challenges in the school among the students in terms of the
Well, if you think we don't like to talk about race, we don't like to talk about sex either, do we?
We have to deal with that sexual urge, that sex drive. A lot of the fallout it's a lot about the sexual tensions in the classrooms and how we're going to treat with it. And, we have to deal with that, and we have to get people trained who can understand it and who can treat with it. And it has to be a collective thing again in terms of collaboration of parents. Because a lot of the parents say, I don't want my child to get any sex education.
Because they'll learn about sex.
They would learn about sex.
And start doing it immediately.
So we have to treat with the question of sex education and orientation, and get away from this fear of people who are different, so that we also have to deal with the question of religion and religious doctrine and what it supports and doesn't support. Because
and what it leads to.